Talk about an introduction. I don't even know if I could follow that up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Six Pixels Under podcast. I see that there's some interest advice and loan advice happening in the chat right now. Glad to see that. Um, well, first off, we came in last week, right? I can't remember if we were here last week. I think we were, but the week before that we took a week off. So this is a consecutive week podcast for us. Um, it's good timing because, of course, we just put out two of our three sponsored video ads that we talked about briefly on last week's podcast, as well as the community post. I just noticed that my mustache is looking really squirrely today. Like, I swear it's getting a bit too long here. Look at that. I couldn't actually start shaping it. Yeah. It's getting a little ridiculous, wouldn't you say? My anxiety is peaking. Oh shit. Oh crap, because they're talking about interest rates. I was like, what? We didn't even say anything yet. We didn't even start the confrontational discussions yet. Anyway, how's everybody doing? The 29th of August. I for some reason I've always treated August and September as interchangeable for some fucking reason. Um and I've been doing it so much that it annoys everybody. So I'm really sorry about that if you've suffered from me mistaking them. Sorry about that. One thing I'll say is I have a lot of Detective Conan music featured on the channel and on my podcasts, but I haven't really played a lot of Lupin music. I loved Lupin growing up, so I saw Maghorn with a badass avatar, the Lupin the third avatar. So I had to give Maghorn some a shout out. So shout out to Maghorn. Let me see what I missed. What's up, Cole? Pogo money. Nice music for a detective. Thanks, appreciate that. What's up, Card? Game live or just talking? Usually just talking. We don't play too many games here. The only times we played games have been like Halo and random MMOs that we're kind of covering. For example, I did a sponsored stream on Arcade ages ago. And I'm open to actually the most to doing sponsored streams. It's just that I don't have much of a stream audience. So unless I stream on YouTube, which is what I started to do, there's not much like incentive there. But I'm hoping that with some future MMOs coming out and online RPGs, I'll have the ability to be able to stream those as a sponsored stream. So I find that those kind of give the best view of what a game is supposed to be like versus straight ads, which is what you guys saw recently, which I'll talk about in a second, but let me catch up here. Samurai Champloo already said it was, and plus it says it in the song, Lupin, da da. I need you to close your boots and your motorcycle. If this is about the gacha sponsorship, people complain or just find something to complain about. YouTube content creation is free, not to, yeah, that's a good point. YouTube content creation is free to view, not free to make. We'll talk about that stuff. Love the content. Glad I'm catching one of these live. Awesome. Welcome, Broid. What's up, Durderick? Byungbin. What's up? I forgot if you're the Korean or the person that's living in Korea. 안녕하세요. Am I gonna play Wrath of the Lich King Classic? I am. Gonna play. Alright. I think we've sufficiently said hello. Anybody else want to get any hellos in? Wait, did I post this already? Yes, I did. I think WoW will die. Ask me the questions in chat, not on Discord. Because I check Discord every now and then, but that's not really where I'm checking to see the chat. What's up, J-Throne? Your name sounds vaguely familiar, so I think I've seen you before. You're creating great YouTube videos. Keep it up. Yeah, let's talk about Han before we get into the spicy stuff. Well, Han is kind of spicy. Let's talk about Han, and I guess we're starting with spicy stuff. So I put out a Death of a Game on Han Tragically, Han was shut down last year in December, and before that, it was sold off and given to another publisher developer altogether, Garena and Frostborn and or Frostburn. I can't remember which one it was, but in 2015. And so Han had a bit of this weird history, right, where it was like simultaneously one of the first, probably arguably the second major, Dota-like at the time they were calling them, or MOBA to come out from the remnants of the Warcraft 3 mod and the team that worked on it. A lot of people don't know that they had Ice Frog early on because it was not really talked about that much all past the initial development phases. And development in that game is largely attributed to Malikan, aka Mark DeForest. So one thing I'll say is I went into Han thinking it was a bit more of a kind of like, this is what you're gonna get story. And I felt like I came out with a lot more understanding of the industry at large and kind of what happened a little bit. And I'll kind of summarize my thoughts. Essentially, Han, I think, is a story of the Dota 2 before Dota 2. So essentially, it was trying in every way to be Dota 2, to be a sequel. It couldn't dream of being a true sequel because it didn't have the and it couldn't compete. No way could S2 Games compete with Valve and Blizzard over the trademark battle when they were fighting over Dota. So they had no literal chance of winning it. So they couldn't call their game Dota. They had to call it something else. Well, Mark DeForest, they already have a universe. The Savage Games were pretty successful, so let's just call it Newerth. Heroes of Newerth. And so you have Heroes of Newerth come out, and it did pretty well at first. People were really interested, were really hyped about it. It had very interesting characters, heroes, or champions for League players. And quite innovative in a lot of ways in terms of game mechanics and how the team compositions work together. Now, the things that made Han unique, ironically, are the things that basically every MOBA now has as a commonplace. And that was kind of like my big takeaway from the video, is that I don't think Han gets enough love and affection and just respect because of that fact. It essentially put voice communication, replay systems, matchmaking systems, like fully fleshed out with rank wins and losses. Like, it put all of that on the map. It was doing that before anybody else was. So essentially, without Han to kind of dictate how the hardcore audience and how the competitive audience grew early on, with MOBAs would not have been the same. So for me, did you say did I win? No, it says I will. I win. So anyway, that was interesting to me. Now, one thing that kind of caught me off guard, and this kind of always has been a trend lately because the internet at large has kind of gotten more toxic, and I'll explain for the people that get sensitive anytime the word toxic is mentioned, which is a bit ironic to me if you think about it. But I actually think the internet has gotten more toxic, and that sounds weird because I actually think that the old internet, the one that I actually grew up on and spent, I mean, hundreds and thousands of hours on, chat rooms, you name it. I'm a true internet kid, Newgrounds, everything, right? Back then it was toxic as hell, right? But the difference is that the toxicity was restricted to basically only a few places. And that's kind of how we managed to keep it controlled, right? Is that the craziness, like something awful, we all kind of knew where it was. And so you could go there and like experience it, Newgrounds, and there's also Funny Junk and a couple other places. You kind of knew where to experience this kind of like raunchy humor, sexual humor, dark humor, kind of like, you see what I'm saying? And so what I'm trying to say, this is where memes come from. Anyone who knows memes, you're well aware of this. This is where meme culture spread and came from. Face Punch as well. So memes kind of came from this culture, but memes now are essentially the broadest and most widely available thing you can imagine almost, right? Even adults and grandpas know what memes are. But memes before were almost like a secret thing. It was kind of like if you weren't an internet like troll lord, you didn't know what memes were. And for anyone here that grew up in that age, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you said things like lol in public, people would look at you like you're a freak. If you said that now, people might just laugh or just kind of look at you and just be like, okay, I know what you're saying, right? Leet speak is literally an official word in the dictionary, for reference. It was not when I was young and we were using leet speak. So the internet has gotten more toxic in the sense that it's more broadly toxic, right? So it's more kind of broadly acceptable. Now, that wouldn't be that bad of a thing if it didn't have this kind of weird after effect, whereas like society has become less social and developed less social skills, we've basically had worse and harder times at socializing and making friends. And so there's been a number of studies that have been done on this. One of them is highly featured in the book Super Better. I recommend looking that up, where essentially they determined that for antisocial males especially, playing competitive games alone without friends was actually harmful to their health. Right? There's obvious reasons for why. You're supposed to be forming connections with your team and teammates like you would in a normal team environment, like in, say, sports. But you're getting randomly matched with people and expected to just work with them, and things are supposed to just kind of take off. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of reasons why. One of the big reasons is, and it's one of the first things that people say, is usually, well, why don't you just mute somebody? And the sad thing is that muting doesn't work because this isn't real life. It's a video game, which means that when you're playing a game online and somebody is trying to communicate with you as a means of playing with you, right? Muting them is actually not as helpful as you might think. And I'll give you a clear example. So if I'm playing basketball and one of my teammates decides to just basically start throwing the ball out of bounds and like aggressively like yelling at everyone, basically like what will happen is like we'll kick his ass. That's just real. Like that's actually happened. We've kicked people off the court before. I'm not saying I'm proud of it, but it's just shit that you do when people are just causing trouble for no reason, when people are there to just play basketball, right? So like basically like beating people up and forcibly not letting them into your game was an effective way to keep trolls and toxic people out of your game. Now, is that like comparable in any way to a video game? No. Does muting actually even solve the problem? No, because technically they can still not work with you. And that's the problem kind of in itself. So what I'm trying to say is like muting in itself, as much as that sounds like something that's cool and maybe you feel like that's very, oh, free speech, free speech. Free speech works, but somebody also can respond to you. And so basically what that creates is an argument because they're also given the ability to speak. And what happens is that people think that the only time toxicity is happening is either banter or it's like when I tell my teammates when they're really in the wrong, and it's like, come on guys, like nobody actually believes that shit, right? Like the majority of trash talk that unfortunately happens nowadays, and I've noticed a massive shift since playing games as a kid with voiceover and voice activation technology, Ventrilo, Xbox, TeamSpeak, you name it, is that we've kind of gotten worse at communicating. And so basically, we make for worse communicators and worse teammates. And in many ways, because we will just angrily shout at our teammates when they do something wrong, thinking for some reason that that would just suddenly make them manifest the right thing. That doesn't make any sense. Like, I understand frustration and being angry, for example, and wanting to vent that. But it's weird how, like, the internet culture has basically warped what trash talk means to almost only mean shit talking on your own teammates. You know, it's like, it's weird like that people wear that as a badge of honor, when where I'm from, if you were that kind of person, you just got beat up or nobody played with you, period. Right? Like if we're playing a sport and this person is just constantly that way, why would we play with them? Wouldn't play with them anymore. So meaning that being a dick to your teammate, while it might feel rewarding, doesn't actually do anything the majority of the time. So I think that that's a bit of where the frustration lies for me. Now, where I will agree with a lot of the discussion, because there's a lot of layers, it's not just one way, is that there have been times where I've given people literal advice in a game, like in a game that I'm a good player at, like Overwatch, where I've said, hey guys, after we get a kill, just push up with your ults and get right in with Reinhardt. As I've mentioned before, which is I think very relevant, I was a competitive player, so when my discussions about toxicity come into play, you can't say that, oh, you're just an angry, bad player. It's like, well, depending on the game, I'm probably better than you are. For example, like Overwatch. Anyone welcome to v1 me, headshots only. Playing as, I forgot what McCree's new name, Cassidy. But the point is that I was a top 500 player in Overwatch. the amount of insanity that I would hear from my teammates trying to give me advice was like, I mean, Card can talk about this from his experiences working with a master tier, or I believe a top 500 coach. I mean, guys, the worst advice you can imagine. Like, I mean, I'd be playing and I'm playing as McCree, and yeah, I was kind of only a McCree player. Feel free to look my account up. I've posted it before. I think it's like NerdSlayer number sign 1386 or something like that. My KBs per game is like 25. So meaning that like I'm literally almost carrying every game I play. When I play McCree, because I suck almost everyone else, especially because I'm washed. But anyway, I know life McCree. The amount of games, guys, that I've had where players have said, "You're the reason we're losing, McCree. I know it's you. I know you're the reason." It's like I can't even say anything because I could say the truth, which is that I have every DPS gold medal and I don't know what you're talking about, which is the truth. But guess what my teammates will say? There's no scoreboard, so who are you? I don't believe you. You don't have golds. And then it's just like, oh, yeah, so I can't actually talk to my teammates because they won't even believe reality, which is that like, sorry, you might feel with your feelings like I shouldn't be playing McCree, but every statistic is not backing that up. And then of course people would respond with the most common response or retort, which was, stats don't mean everything. It does when I have 20 final blows a game, because that means that I'm basically killing everyone in the game. So my advice and my perspective on this, guys, I think it's much different than most. This is not me trying to say I'm such an elite gamer. It's because I'm actually an academic type of person, right? Like I'm a detective, right? I'm trying to figure out the mystery here. And for me, it's always been a mystery of why is there this big divide between what is helpful communication and what's not. And why is there this weird counterculture that always gets created anytime I ever even mention toxicity? And I mean literal mentions of it. I can just mention the actual statistical or like logical fact that it existed. Like in the case of Han, people got offended that I mentioned it, when the CEO literally has logs of him being toxic. Like, are people going to say that that doesn't matter? I know you might feel that way, but facts don't care about your feelings, and it does matter. Perception matters. Saying you just got shit on, or whatever the different announcement sayings are, is kind of leaning towards that more hyper-competitive, toxic perspective. If you like that, by all means, go play that. I played Darkfall, one of the most toxic competitive games ever. But guess what? And Guild Wars 2, by the way. Nobody's going to play those games. Those games are not played by almost anybody. Guild Wars 2, before you attack me, I'm talking about structured PvP. Nobody plays that shit. Sorry, I know there's some tournament, but I mean, who's left at this point? None of the championship teams, right? Like, come on. No one's playing that stuff. So it is a Dunning-Kruger effect, unfortunately, where a lot of players will feel like, well, Nerd is just talking about toxicity, so he's like all those other dummy, sensitive guys who are just talking about it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, that's why in my Overwatch video, despite people also getting mad at me for that, for telling them my competitive history, they're like, oh, wow, talking about bragging. It's like, guys, I'm trying to give you legitimacy, so you understand that my perspective concerning this is legitimate. The whole point is that I'm trying to be an expert as much as I can. So I am going to try to have as much legitimacy as I can over a specific topic or game. And just, sorry, the amount of low elo arguments I've seen from this are just, they're crazy. Crazy at this point. Think of it this way. If just muting your teammates work, then why are there so many videos in Wood League and all these different meme videos from League of Legends, for example, where basically players are role-playing as a golem? Or like, when your players are, for example, in my example in Overwatch, telling you, dude, switch off of this, switch off of Hanzo, bro, switch off of Hanzo. It's like literally the game, and I have a video recording of this, I've posted it on my Twitter, where the guy's saying, switch off Hanzo, switch off Hanzo. I should fire the arrow, wins the game. It's like, that stuff happened all the time, and it's funny, but after a while, it just gets annoying because there's no scoreboard. There's no way to literally see how somebody's performing. That being said, I know I'm bringing up a hyper-specific example. Han had a scoreboard, Dota had a scoreboard, League had a scoreboard. You're going to say those all had scoreboards, so like, what are you trying to say? True, they had scoreboards, but the point that I'm trying to make is that Overwatch is the game that I was a top 500 player in. In League, I was no more than a Diamond 3 player. or sorry, Plat 1 player. I failed my Diamond promos. A Plat 1 player. I was never more than a Plat 1 player. In Heroes of the Storm, I duoed with my friend who was Master Tier and GM later on, but I was never ranked higher than Master Tier personally. In Dota, I was a complete shitter. In Han, I never even played it. In Warcraft 3, I was a shitter. So like that's just the truth. Like, so that's why when I looked at Han and I looked at games like that, I can't just give my perspective only, right? Because I don't think I'm a good enough player to just rely on my perspective for that stuff. Now with Overwatch, a lot of what you got, that's me. A lot of that stuff comes from me. It wasn't me cross-referencing with the other developers and other pro players as much, because I felt very confident given my, 500 hours I spent in the game, my LAN win, so on and so forth, that I always like to brag about, despite that it was just open brackets. But anyway, so I'm not trying to oversimplify these discussions. Toxicity discussions are incredibly complex, and that's part of the problem with my series, is that in the end, so many like sections I wish I could donate just 10 to 15 more minutes to, and it's just like, I can't even do that. But it just, at the same time, I'm gonna have to push against this counterculture where people think that it's being tough and being badass to just shit on players because they're not good at a game. And it's like, did I used to do that? Of course. I was an angsty kid. I was angry. My parents were divorced. I, never saw my parents. Like, I was an angry kid. So did I do stuff like that all the time? But like, do I do it now? Past the point of competition? No. And that's the other thing that I want to talk about that I haven't gotten to yet, is the banter part. People think that because if you have the first perspective, which is like curb toxicity, build social systems to make such less common, that suddenly means that you're not okay with banter. It's like, guys, do you not even know me? Like, I saw someone post earlier, and I think they're even in chat, that were saying something about, oh, your snarky responses to people. Do you guys know who I am? Most of you don't. That's okay. Welcome. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for watching my content. Thanks for watching my videos. Good to see you guys if this is your first time seeing me on camera. Hello, how's it going? My name is Justin. Me as a person is similar to what you see in my videos, because that's a part of my person, right? Being basically projected out. But you guys also haven't seen me play games or played games with me. Not all of you have. Some of you here have. The people who have can say that I'm a very, what kind of player? Fill in the blanks. Competitive player. That might be one someone says. Silly player is another thing that people will say. Because I am a very silly person. It's just that my seriousness is focused in my series. No pun intended. Because death of a game is a serious topic, and online gaming means the world to me. I mean, online gaming and martial arts, I coop them together. They saved my life, So, he smelled funny weird. Doing a show does not mean you are the person. Exactly, BlizzDK. I am not, NS. That's why I actually created NS and NerdSlayer as two separate identities. Some people know this. I know it's not super said a lot. We're gonna try to make that come out more in the new art. That, by the way, thank you for Tower of Fantasy and Phantom Blade Executioners for sponsoring us regarding that. We'll try to make more hints at that so people can understand the lore more. But NS is the name of the detective, right? Because detectives sign their names with initials. So I am Nerdslayer, which means I am snarky. Literally, it's in my name. People would ask me that previously, but they would say, oh, like, what is Nerdslayer? Shouldn't you change your name? You seem so, like, level-headed, and you seem so da-da-da. And it's like, I've been doing martial arts since I was 4, which means that I've been fighting since I was 4. I took 5 years off to play football, with American football. So meaning that conflict has been a part of my life since I was young. And it's actually the thing that made me enjoy PvP and MMOs. It wasn't MMO PvP for the sake of it. In fact, my early game experiences with MMOs were all social and roleplay, because I didn't really want to get on these games and PvP because I was doing that stuff in real life. I didn't want more conflict. And that might be weird for some people, but again, like, I don't like action as much as people might think. I'm actually a big fan of narrative. Detective Conan's my favorite anime. That says all you need to know about me. The majority of the action in that is just chasing people down. Like, there's just really not much action in that show. And that's because that's what detective shows pretty much used to be. Watch old black and white Sherlock. There's almost no action. Watson shoots like one guy and like Sherlock beats like one dude up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like that's the series. Like, there's not much action going on. So my gaming personality is, weirdly enough, fairly different than my real life kind of personality. And it's because I kind of had to hide that part of me. I was a gamer, I was this super hardcore gamer, but I grew up in a neighborhood where people didn't even have computers. People didn't even speak English where I'm from. Most of it was an ESL neighborhood. Most people didn't even have computers. I had a computer because my grandpa gave me his old computer when I was a young kid. So basically, just because my mom's side of the family was a little bit more privileged, they were able to afford, you know, in their retirement, multiple computers. So they had multiple house computers. At some point, you know, they upgraded, and they gave me the old Dell. And so that's kind of how I got involved in all of that stuff. But yeah, like people will say like, oh, like Nerd Slayer's a dick. Like when he responds to people saying stuff on YouTube, it's like, okay, the only time you ever see me as a dick, and check me if not, is like if somebody is not being constructive, I'm always going to be a dick. A dick. That won't change. I'm telling you right now, like literally that should be prefaced on my videos, is that if you think I'm going to agree with you just because you disagree with me, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I have to actually see the value of what you're trying to say. So if you present it to me with a good argument, for example, like Maghorn did in chat, where he told me, look, I think with your recent video ads, my issue is that it doesn't match your normal content in the way that you structured it. That's a great point that I can't really defend, which I'll get into that in a second. But that's like an argument where, first off, Maghorn's a long-standing member of the community. I've played many games with Maghorn. When Maghorn tells me something, I listen to it, right? That doesn't mean that, sorry, if you don't play with me for a fuck ton of games that I'm not going to listen to. It's more that it's just that the relationships that I'm forming with my viewers that actually are engaging with me, the human being, are the ones that I'm going to think about the most and feel the most. You see what I'm saying? So while people might feel like they know me and they can learn parasocially from me by watching my videos, you're not actually learning about me. And you're not actually knowing me. And that actually is completely related to what we're talking about here. Which is that me as a human being, I have my own personality, my own like needs, wants, morals, values, so on and so forth. And then me, the content creator, I have those as well. And oftentimes, of course, those are going to be right along the same line. But there are times when they're not necessarily. For example, I cover games that I don't like. Sometimes I cover games that I don't like the developers. In fact, one of the times I did it, you guys can probably point the video out, I kind of admitted it. Like, you know what I'm saying? So like sometimes a lot of these companies don't really want to work with me because they think that they're going to get that honesty, and they will get that honesty when I'm reviewing your game in that context. And when the Reaper comes knocking, like I'm going to try to tell the best story that I can tell. So anyway, I just think it's interesting that people have this idea that because I'm a content creator, I have to somehow forego my personality, which is a cocky, snarky, funny kind of easygoing guy, which as long as you're willing to dish it out at me, I'm dishing it back. There's no problems here. Anyone who knows me knows this is fair, knows it's fair game. All my friends insult me. All my friends talk shit to me, regardless of me as the content creator with an audience or whatever. Like, nobody that's close to me treats me like I'm special in that respect, right? And that's just how I like it. I want to be treated just like I'm normal. But that's part of the problem is that like people might feel like by treating me like just a content creator, you are treating me kind of normal. But in many cases, you're not actually, because you're not going to see the rest of what comes in to the process of being a content creator. Now, a good point is somebody said in chat earlier that a lot of people realize that content creation itself is not free, but watching content on YouTube is free. And that's a common misconception that a lot of people have, which means that you're so spoiled on watching free content that suddenly when players and people are trying to get a little bit more money to afford whatever it is they're doing, people naturally, there's nothing wrong with that, are going to be like, wait a minute, what is this? This is an advertisement. Because advertisements most of the time suck. They're boring. They're not that exciting, especially when it's the same ad over and over again. You know, the same like easy clean whatever spray bottle crap. Like, you know, like you get tired of the same ad over and over again. Ads in media, especially content creators, is a little bit different. Essentially how they work is that you work with different sponsors who might sponsor you for a product that you use, might sponsor you for just wanting you to talk about their product. They might give you their product. They might want you to give their thoughts on the game. They might have specific things they want you to cover. Right? There's many ways that you can make money from a sponsor. But at the end of the day, sponsors exist in the ecosystem because the ecosystem itself doesn't function safe and consistent enough to be that much of a driving force. And to kind of explain what I'm talking about, well, before I get into the money discussion, let me just scroll it back up because there's been a lot of discussion and I was making a big point earlier, so I missed a lot of it. Is anyone here a sinner? Yes. Death of a Game Han and Asheron's Call made me feel it in the feels. That's awesome. I'm glad. What's up, question mark V? Yeah, it's sad, Tekken 7, that whenever your community has embraced cheaters or glitches, it basically becomes that you can't compete unless you do those things. Coming from the Halo 2 audience, which was toxic, by the way, as well, we essentially came up with these glitches that made it to where non-competitive players couldn't even touch us. Like I mean, I've talked about this before, but the difference in time to kill between a regular player is 3 or 4 shots. Normally, it's a hit followed by a shot in the head. Well, with a BXR, it's 0.3 seconds. I timed it, my own even. So that just goes to show you that shaving off 0.7 to 1.7, 1.3 seconds is the difference between not even competitive at all. Exactly, Jim Jones, about the random level of disconnect. That's actually what they've been studying, is that that level of disconnect isn't actually helpful. And so when you lash out at those people, it's partly because you feel like you can do that, right? Leaving a scoreboard out was a horrible experiment. Agreed. Ben Shapiro. My college roommate would tell me how to properly play LoL, and he was a silver rank, and I was platinum. I even tried to take his advice, and I'd be like, dude, it doesn't work that way. See, my friends will do stuff like that, but they're always joking. The problem is that when you get that random teammate online, you don't know if he's joking half the time, and he's probably not. He's probably honestly telling you to switch off. I will say I do think MOBAs are probably some of the most toxic games based on especially how team centric they are, but I think Overwatch is up there, guys, seriously. Like the amount of toxicity I get in normal games in Overwatch is just bizarre. I get more normal watch toxicity than non-normal games, like ranked games. Yeah, well, that's where Nerd Slayer sort of comes from. As you know, Daedalus, Nerd Slayer, the name actually came from when I was growing up. I was playing a lot of video games competitively in my teenage years, and you know, whenever I would play, people would always say like, "Oh, like Slade, Slade." That was a common thing for Halo players. You know, Slade and Slayer was very commonly said, and so you know, hearing Slade all the time just became part of my lexicon. And so after a while, I thought to myself, well, when I was young, I was very insecure about being seen and known to be a nerd. Because again, I grew up in a very jock-centric environment. I also did sports myself and martial arts. So like people, for some reason, would choose that gaming would be the thing that would make fun of. Though people did make fun of the martial arts sometimes. So it was always like an insecurity for me. So when I got older and made this channel, because I've had many different names since then. One of the names that I had was called Force Nerdslayer. And the reason why I had that name was because I used to go by Exiled Force. I was a very edgy kid. X-Force was how I shortened it. In fact, X-Force was my professional name in Guild Wars 2. People hated me in that game because I was a bit of a trash talker. which is again ironic that I get, wow, Nerdslayer is such a snowflake, always talking about toxicity. It's like, okay, you guys literally don't know me. That's fair, fine, I get it. But there's a little bit more to it than that's all I'm trying to say. Regarding toxicity and my like history with it. So after X-Force, I thought that that was a bit too edgy. So I went with Force Nerdslayer. And it was because I was saying that I'm the Force and then I'm nerd slaying. And so after that, I thought that that just seems needlessly long. So I took off the Force part and just put Nerdslayer. Or sorry, just put Nerdslayer. But yes, the name literally came from the concept and idea of being a PvPer and slaying nerds, right? So it's almost simultaneously ironic because it's like, I'm a nerd slaying nerds. But the other joke that I would say is that I wasn't a nerd, but I had to become a nerd to slay nerds. So that's just the joke. Well, I think that's part of the thing, Byungbin. When you talk about toxicity in the Modern Warfare lobbies, I'll tell you from the Halo experiences. Was it toxic? Yes. But the reason why Halo's treated a little bit different for me, especially, is that, and I show my friends this all the time, is that when I play Halo, especially MCC, when you go into a lobby, it's people shit talking, it's people like, you know, riffing on each other, it's people bantering, meaning that it's built into the game. And what I'm saying is it's socially expected almost. Where people are having fun over tea bags, you killed this guy, you run this guy over. It's like this constant back and forth comedic and like confrontational dance, if you will. And it's overwhelming for a lot of players, totally understand. There's been times that I told my partner to put her headphones on and like listen to it, and she's been like, what the heck is going on? Like, this is crazy. And it is. A lot of the time it's just like, I'll go into chat and like literally whatever is on my mind, because that's my favorite style of trolling, is just whatever you feel. So I'll go in and I'll just be like, hey, anybody want to hear about my story about the time I went to the store and bought bread? And there's always like one person who will be like, sure, man. Like, or if I'm playing with my cousin, he'll pretend he doesn't know me and just say, yeah. And then I'll sit there in lobby chat, proceed to talk over everybody about the story about how I went to the store to get bread. So it's like, that's not aggressive towards anybody. Is it annoying? Yes. Is it annoying on purpose? Yes. Is it meant to be humorous? Yes. And so most people can sense that right away, right? And be like, oh, okay, that's pretty funny. Like, he's telling the story about bread. Sometimes people will literally say, why'd you stop? When I stop telling them. Because I go into the whole bit or whatever. So that's just how I have fun. Now, have there been times where I've been like, man, you guys got shit on, da-da-da? Yeah. Because again, that's kind of how it goes. But after the game, if somebody were to say, hey, GG's, I would say GG in response, because that's good sportsmanship. Just because I'm trash talking doesn't mean that I'm also not a believer in good sportsmen. And I think that's where like the fine line lies, is that, are you respecting the competition in the person, and is it just about competition? I feel like if you make it too personal, it's not really about just competition. But 1 second, y'all, I need to drink some water. Okay. I felt like we did that whole monologue faster. Geez, YouTube, chill out withholding all these comments for review. Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that, to be honest, but it's like, here's my options on YouTube. Either like let the auto moderator just flag everything, or I get like spammers just posting random shit. Hey, how's it going, Wolf? What's up, Aura? Exactly. Agreed, Blizz. Agreed, guy with pants. The Conan Lupin crossover sucked because it was a little bit too fan servicey, in my opinion. But the movies of the Lupin series and the Conan series, probably some of the best anime movies ever. Like, no one ever, it's all, everyone talks about DBZ movies, but like, those movies are really good. Exactly, Jim Jones. The reason why I like old detective movies and books as well and shows is because they actually treat it like it's a solvable mystery, which means that they're not suddenly going to reveal the magic ingredient that you never saw the entire time. I hate that CSI and all these other shows that masquerade as detective shows, that's exactly what they do. Where the detective parts are basically just like plot devices. Oh, do I need to lower it? Is it way too loud? I'll lower it. Whenever I do that background sound, I think I can lower the media source. I'll work on that. First MMO I played was Night Online. That's a classic. I feel like responding to dickishness with dickishness and kind doesn't really make you a dick. You think so? I don't, but I appreciate the sentiment. I'm definitely a dick, but I think that my dickness comes more from a desire to basically want to engage and understand people. So when I feel like they don't want to engage and understand me, then it's just like, okay, well, screw you, right? Like it's almost like this mental note of like, I'm not going to talk to this person then. Um, for some people, that element is just negativity in general. For me, it's not negativity actually. It's if I think that the negativity is either poorly structured or there's no like so there's no substance to it, or it's just like very poor like negativity. And I say that to say that like there have been times, I'm not gonna lie, people have insulted me pretty well, and I did like it and heart their comment. And people might be like, why? Because again, I think banter's funny. So sometimes I sorry about the transition video, but I did it really quickly because my partner was walking in. So see you later, Ginger Spice. Yeah, we'll get more into the specifics too if you want to stick around. The anonymity. Man, it's hard to say without water. Um, of the internet brings out the worst in humans. Agreed. We haven't started talking about that yet, Gabe. We'll get there. I can watch my arteries clogging just watching the butterfly. Yeah, Willow, luckily you're not the only one that says snarky. Snarky is um I would say a bit more British. So I would say that I do actually get it a lot. Or have gotten it a lot historically, but recently what I get is more not snarky but arrogant. People say arrogant as a insult. I never got the or got the hate. I never got to eat ad reads. That would be pretty badass. Eat ad reads. That was the idea with HelloFresh, at least. I never got the hate on ad reads as long as the sponsor isn't a scam or predatory. I have no problem with them. What's up, Young Falcon? With how divisive Gotcha is right now, I wouldn't be surprised if people did think Tower of Fantasy was a scam. I think that there's a lot of xenophobia that also is at play here that people don't really want to admit because it's like racial discussions always get people angry. The last time I had one where I called people out for being racist for assuming that the Chinese market is the same for some reason as Korea's market, which is just not wrong, it's racist. People don't like to have this sort of discussions. Um, whatever reason. Oh, I see. Yeah, all ads are absolute cancer. Seeing an entire video as a goddamn ad is infuriating. Sponsor block has been a lifesaver for me. Why would it be infuriating for you? Do you not want to support content creators or support people getting paid what they should be getting paid? Like out of curiosity? Because like anyone that ever has like a completely against ad stance, do you just not watch TV? You not watch any shows, period? You just don't watch anything? You don't even consume video games because they have ads too? Like, I find that hard to believe. It just seems like people like to pick and choose and be a little bit performative with when they talk about stuff like that. Feel your left ventricle slamming shut. Valorant, you think is the most toxic game? I've only played a little bit, but it was pretty toxic when I did play. The sad thing is, though, Willow, is not most people watch these kinds of videos anyway. I used to do update-style videos, and they used to get so little views that, like, after a while, it's just like, what's the point in even doing them? How do I decide which games to talk about? Honestly, just feelings. Whatever I feel like, mixed with whatever sounds interesting. So sometimes it's something that's like recent, but only if it interests me. Like Spellbreak is the next one that people have figured out already, and I picked Spellbreak because I like the game personally, and I have a relationship with the creator of the game. So I'll have some perspectives coming from the developers who literally made the game. Brood War was the first one that I really got into, I would say in that way. Hey, love the YouTube videos, thanks. The Apex Nerd. Apex Nerd would have been a great name too. Make a toxic Overwatch video would be funny. Honestly, I probably could. Especially because it's funny because whenever I'm on any of my other accounts that essentially, well, even Diamond is incredibly toxic now. It's just absurd, the amount of stuff that I hear, like... Weed smoking Jedi. I used to know a guy named Mark Point. His name was Craven Moorhead. I'm not even kidding. His name is literally Craven with no G. Craven Moorhead. His name, I'm not even kidding, existed for 3 years on Xbox Live. It wasn't until Gears of War 2 came out, and I'm not even kidding, it was right when it came out, that my friend was honestly probably one of the better in the world Gears of War players, which, little known fact, I was as well in number 1. Don't get your hopes ahead of you. I wasn't that good in the other ones as much, but so in 2, him and I would do lobbies together, and of course we would make people rage. And he was a very big shit talker. He loved to shit talk. And so, sure enough, he was shit talking at launch day, and literally the day of launch, he got his name banned. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I just thought it was funny that he lasted that long. Like, you're in school, but this is more important than school. Lol. We can do Space Station 13. Sorry, sometimes my speech impediment lisp comes through a little bit whenever I'm dry mouthed. I did my voiceover before this for my next ad read, which is the last one that I'm doing, by the way, for the video ads, which we're still going to talk about. I'm just building the anticipation. Exactly, Jace. I know some people will be like, wow, but my mom means so much to me. But it's like back then when we were talking about banging somebody's mom, I mean, it wasn't serious, guys. Thoughts on Riot getting into the MMO space? Very interesting. Appreciate that, R. Appreciate the 5 USD. Thanks. Money. Here you go. Gabe, you know what? I disagree with you, but I'm gonna respect you for offering that perspective and taking the time to actually explain yourself. Because one thing I'll say is I think you understand what I'm or where I'm coming from at the very least. Dude, Clixies, Clickies, H1Z1 was probably the most toxic like developer team I've ever encountered. Ever. They literally like badmouthed me like aggressively. And then when I tried to talk to them about it, they wouldn't talk to me. So they just used their like checkmarked audiences on Twitter to just shit on me. Appreciate you getting YouTube Premium for that reason. What's up, Klaba? Using both, though, would only mean if they were actually getting enough. And in many cases, they're not, which is why so many content creators go to so many different outlets like Patreon, and as many as they can. Is because they're essentially trying to stack all the money that they can. All right, we finally caught up in chat. Unless anybody else had any pressing questions that I didn't cover or get to. We were trying to talk about Han, so I went into a giant discussion about toxicity because, again, like, did I do that discussion justice in that video or the Overwatch video? No. But to be honest, toxicity deserves its own video entirely. And I'm sure that video will be very much controversial, but it'll be an interesting discussion nonetheless. How's it going, King Rai? At least they talk to you, even if negative. I tested for Gearbox's Project 1v1 and the devs never talked to us. Only through a CM, even during tests. Yeah, but I would actually argue that that's probably pretty common. New World, for example, let us talk to other developers, but it was only conversationally, really. Like, it wasn't super at length. If anything, I don't want to call anybody out because the developer I'm talking about is a badass developer and is one of the few people that I think is really talented on that team. Talked to me and learned more about the process than I think any of the other guys did. Just from having dinner with me and having a drink. We talked about everything. That's pretty interesting to me, right? I watch with ad block on and have watched most of your videos, so I owe you. Thanks for all the free content you put out for us. I appreciate that, Willow. Also appreciate you saying what you said and speaking your mind. Just so you know, and let me just say this broadly because I don't want to address just you because you're here and I respect you for doing that. But it's not just you, like, clearly. But I respect you for being here nonetheless. Is that I actually want people to tell me how they feel. But one thing I ask for you to do, and I think Willow has shown that in this chat alone, is be willing to actually hear my perspective, because ultimately that's relevant, right? You have to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, instead of just thinking it's, okay, money, okay, money, okay, money. That's like an oversimplification that in many cases is kind of like a bit disingenuous, you know? Not that you said that stuff, Willow, but you get my point. So I'm going to do some math with you guys. I'm going to show you a screenshot so you will see that this is a number that is real that I just took right now, right? Ready for this? Okay. This number, you see this number? That's how much this channel has made since inception. So since 6 years ago. Now, let's just do some really quick math. We divide that by years. That's how much I've made per year. Now, I'm self-employed, which means I pay self-employment tax, which means after I account for how much I pay my editor, I would have this amount left for for the entire year. Then, for the entire year, take off how much I pay in taxes every year. And it's going to be at least around there. So, again, for people who are actually interested in learning this kind of stuff and seeing where the content creators come from and understanding why they make certain decisions, that's why I take the time to do it in something like this. I understand some people might feel like, why don't I do this in a video? It's because in the end, nobody will really watch that video because that video isn't really what people want to see. What they want to see and hear is me actually telling them. And I know that sounds weird because it's like a video does that, but yeah, like, that means that they have to go search that out on their own to get an understanding of why you're doing something versus just reacting emotionally to the thing that you're already posting in front of them. So, anyway. So now 21,600 insurance. I don't have insurance. So we're not even done taking off my expenses yet, guys. All right. So I didn't have insurance this whole year. That means no healthcare, no benefits, no 401ks, no magic stacks of money that are hidden somewhere. no inheritance, no none of that stuff. So you have 21,600, and I have a partner as well. So I have a partner, and I have to pay 21,600, or that's how much I get in a year. Now, how much I was paying in rent when I was living in Austin was $1,200. So if we just really quickly take this 2160, remember that number in your head, and do my rent payment for the year, that means that I only have, after I pay rent, this much money for the entire year. That means that for the entire year, this is the spending cash that I have, not including my other bills. So that means this is not including internet. This is not including phone. This is not including food. This is not including, you get the idea. So basically, once you break it down to that level, divide this number after my expenses into the 12, and that's what I'm making in profit, right? What's considered profit, right? So yeah, that's essentially how much money I've made, which means that no feelings will change that. No wishful thinking will change that. And yeah, Austin's expensive, and US is expensive. So it very much is a passion project. For cross-reference, I worked in corporate before. I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I worked for $1 billion Fortune 500. I worked in construction management, project management, estimation. I worked on Texas Children's Hospital, Methodist Houston, MD Anderson, biggest cancer hospital. I've worked on some of the biggest hospitals in all of Texas. And that's where my experience had came from previously. So essentially, when I made the switch, which was about 3 years in, to go full time, I gave up all of that. Benefits, savings. I didn't even have any savings at the time. In fact, my employer literally screwed me out of the $10,000 I was supposed to make from bonuses that I had made over $1 million in sales for that year. Didn't get paid the bonuses. So essentially, it's like getting into it without, the help of my brother, who literally helped me, and the channel support blowing up so quickly like it did after I went full time. Oh my god, that was like, I wouldn't have been able to get here. So that's just literally like what happened. And so as you can imagine, like, this isn't enough money to really make much of a living when I'm paying over 10% of whatever I make as somebody who makes below average income in taxes. So again, the reason why I don't talk about money a lot of the time is that there's this weird bitterness, unfortunately, that exists all throughout the world, but largely in America, where when people talk about money, there's always this kind of like anger and like jealousy that goes with it, where it becomes like, well, why are you complaining? Second. Sorry, my my little baby dog. When she hears me in here streaming, she comes and y'all can't hear her, but she comes and knocks on the door. So I'm telling my partner on comms to go get her. But anyway, so this is like, I'm not the biggest YouTuber, but I would say that I'm a decent sized YouTuber, right? Now you might be asking, like, can ad rates affect, like, do some months you make more? Yes, which means that my income is not consistent. So that means that the majority of the income that you're seeing is actually made in only 4 months of the year. So basically 1/4 of the year I make the majority of revenue. And that's just how the industry works. These are all facts. None of this I'm telling you is like opinion. None of this is like feelings. I'm not trying to like, confuse anybody. This is fact. You can look this all up. This is like, I mean, my information is public record. You can even go look me up if you want. See how much I make, so on and so forth. No offense, but you look exactly how I expect a person with what, big head? Is that what you're trying to say? Big head? I look like a person with a big head? I do have a huge head. And I'm also a giant person in general. So if that's what you're trying to say, then fair enough. But so anyway, now there were a lot of technical, paths that I could have taken while making content, right? So when I first created my series, it was a Death of a Game series that covered post-mortem games and content. And what I realized early on is that although I could get respectable views and be quite happy with the views that I got, and potentially even have enough to live off of, I was never really going to make that much. I actually worked at I'll give you a hint. It's the biggest insulation company in America. That's the company that I worked with. IBP, I think, is what they're called, and under their stock profile. But anyway, just you can feel free to look up biggest insulator in US, whatever. Like, that's who I worked for. But so I realized that, like, by making these kind of niche videos that are also fairly informative and very deep, I wasn't going to be making a lot of money, right? So I never got into YouTube to make a lot of money. So I don't want people to feel bad for me because I make like less money or something. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is what I realized early on is that I couldn't make enough to even live. And I, unfortunately, the past 2 years, I didn't make enough to live. I went into debt, and more than just being into debt, I went into a deeper depression as a depressive person with PTSD than I normally had ever experienced. So it basically got to the point to where I had to make big decisions because I had to change my approach for my health, because I can't afford healthcare here in America. Big reason why I'm moving to Mexico, and wanted to move abroad now for the past 2 years, because it's been a big process. And the first approach that I went for was just like, you know what, let me just try to cover games that are like very popular. And it worked. And I got very good results. My channel grew exponentially. But when I started to what I started to feel and realize is that, wait a minute, even though that was successful, I don't want to just cover all the most popular games, because some of these stories are boring. Like, that's fairly embarrassing to admit, but it's just like, some of these big popular game stories are more boring than a story that's on a small game no one's ever heard of, right? I'll give you a great example. Spellborn Chronicles has some of my least views out of any of my videos. It is one of the most interesting Death of a Game. I recommend you go watch it, especially if you want to be counterculture and be cool. That video is cool because the story of that game is like bizarre. It's like you never have ever heard a story like that before. I promise you. So I love stories like that because online gaming is my life, which means that I'll tell stories like that, and even if I made no money, right? But since I'm, again, trying to do this professionally and do it as a career, so I can put out 2 videos, those 2 Death of a Games a month, and more content, so on and so forth, as well as new resources to do those things, I have to think about how much I'm making and how much I'm able to save. Since I am a independent contractor with my own business, well, because that's how it works in America, I get double taxed, essentially. So my taxes are much higher than somebody else's. Which means that I'm actually a lot more reliant on making a lot more money, as you can imagine. Now, here's the problem with that. Some people will ignorantly say, well, Nerd Slayer, just make more videos. But work isn't in a vacuum, right? Like, it takes time and effort. And also, the process of making the video sometimes takes weeks. So, meaning I can't even fit enough of these in a month, even if I tried. So me trying to base my career around being the fastest to cover a game doesn't make any sense when my series is literally a post-mortem series. So it's something that, like, I get asked about constantly. People are always asking me, why haven't you covered this game yet? It's so popular, nerd. Why? And it's like, I can feel like they're not mad just because I'm not covering it. They're just like, make this money, And it's like, well, because the game's not dead, bro. I disagree with you. Like, I'm sorry just because it would make me money that I don't want to do it. You see what I'm saying? And that's where, like, my artistic vision always is going to override my ability and desire to make money. Is that in those instances, I'm like, these games aren't dead, so I don't want to cover them. Just because I'm going to make a lot of money covering them, which is definitely going to happen, because that's how kind of the industry works, right? Covering things that are trendy, so on and so forth. So I didn't want to do that. And actually, if you guys remember, that's when I started to open up the idea of doing a lot more streams. I started streaming more. After I started streaming more, I started putting out more videos to try to counteract that, because I wasn't putting out as popular like one videos, and that worked for a time. But then we kind of stagnated. We kind of stagnated again, and just simply speaking, for about 6 months of one of those years or 2 of those years, we were just making no money and doing really badly. And so I sat down and thought to myself, like, I need to redo the Death of a Game series. And so we did, and of course we got a lot of success from it. Am I still living in Spain? No, actually, I haven't been in Spain for the past 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. Big head of hair, or big head, bearded and curly hair, fair enough. But so it wasn't like it was kind of like I had to start asking myself, how am I gonna make this money? Because it's not coming from what I'm doing now, which people love, they respect. I feel like I have a place. I feel like people enjoy my content, and I love doing it, but I'm not making enough to live off of it. I don't even have health care. I can't even get dental care, like basic necessities. I don't even have access to. For 2 of those years, I didn't even have a bed. That's a true fact. I just slept on the floor. Again, not because I want anybody's pity. I grew up like that. I grew up poor, so I could deal with environments and struggle like that. But then it started to kind of dawn on me, you know what? What if I involved my community and I crowdsourced all of this? Right? You could be a 600-pound tard on TLC and I'd still watch your stuff. Well, I appreciate that you don't like me just because of my look. But I realized, you know what? Let me turn to my community. Let me start crowdsourcing stuff. Unfortunately, the healthcare system in the US isn't a conversation of, is it good? Having worked in the best hospitals in the world, US has the best healthcare in the world. Like, if you're talking about pure ability. But that's not what we're talking about here. For somebody like me who has PTSD, CTE, which means brain trauma, I need psychiatry care, I need a therapist, I need like possible bed visits. Like, someone like me and my partner, also similar situation, we've calculated it, we would have to spend $1,000 for help. Not a joke. Anybody here who has a family can back up what I'm saying. It's not that crazy. So to answer your question, Mexico has better healthcare because it has private healthcare access, but also has better healthcare in terms of accessibility for the broad population, as well as there's still good healthcare in cities like Mexico City and where my family's from, Monterrey. But anyway, so I turned to the community, and I wanted to do things as crowdfunded. So do you guys remember when I went to PAX Unplugged and I did a video of me dressed up? It was high production value. I mean, I literally had a professional videographer, director working on that, with a professional sound designer, like literally professionals, right? With professional equipment, professional cameras, professional microphones, mic lab setups, you name it. Pulled out all the stops. Did a crowdfunding video, gave everybody what the rundown is, which is that in order for this channel to keep making the kind of content that we want to make and more, we have to free ourselves from being reliant on ad revenue. Because at the moment, if we're reliant on ad revenue, it means that we basically have to cover the popular things, which are going to make people get mad, but that's the kind of stuff that's going to make the channel way more money. Objective fact. It's not opinion, unfortunately. And so it was like, I had that discussion and I told everyone, like, look, if you don't want this to be the future of the channel right now, we have to turn towards crowdfunding. Now, I'm not embarrassed to say this, but it failed, and it failed epically. Did I get a big increase? Yes, and thank you for everyone who provided that money, because it was a lifesaver, seriously. But it wasn't enough. It equaled out to a few $100s, which, as you can imagine, wasn't enough to either beat the expenses that we have, and it wasn't enough to save any money going forward. So it just didn't work. Crowdfunding didn't work. So we tried to trend chase a little bit. I didn't like it. Not that it didn't work. I didn't like it. And then we tried to crowdfund, and that didn't work either. So it basically came back to, you know what? I think I'm going to have to start running with ads in my videos. And so that's when that started. We started introducing ads because essentially I needed them to survive economically. For Card and chat, back this up. Card was around me. Card saw me save money whenever I was trying to go places. Like, it's unless I'm just putting that on or something to like trick people who are meeting me in person that I'm secretly rich or something. It's like, no, I wasn't. And it's because I love this. That's why I do it. I do it because I love it. And we'll change them back. Don't worry about the thumbnails. I know you're mad. About the thumbnails. I'm mad too, actually. Don't tell Tom that though, but we'll change them back. Or no, we're gonna change them into something better, something that's more modern and keeps that same vibe. So anyway, that's when I started doing video ads, right? And of course, I got negativity every now and then when I would do ads, but nothing really that bad. And I think it's always going to be a thing that people complain about, even though I've explained essentially everything to you guys and the economics of how this works for anybody here who, sorry, but is an adult and manages their own pocketbooks or change and has their own money, businesses, understands basic economics, like handling a checkbook, like things like taxes that you have to pay yearly. If any of you understand any of that on a basic level, you'll know that the information I gave you right now was completely factual, right? Like, I'm just basically giving you my version of the numbers. But somebody else here could give you their W-2 form and it would be the same kind of deal, right? The difference is that they have a different career than mine. And so when you think about how much hours I'm spending on a video, I'm actually making even less money than you might think. Because what I saw people do is take my whole amount, the 21,600, and divide that and say, hey, you make $12 an hour. That's not what I'm making an hour. Because I'm spending the upwards of 40 plus hours on these. Which means that I'm making minimum wage. I've done the math before. When I've actually done the math, it's minimum wage. That's fine with me. I can make minimum wage doing this. But goddamn, people get angry when suddenly I want to take a little bit more so I can elevate myself into like lower mid class, while talking openly with my audience about it. And I think that, again, most of this is kind of natural. I'm not trying to be like, well, why are people thinking differently? It's like, this stuff is bound to happen. The frustration comes from more of what someone said in chat earlier, which is that people don't even bother to try to see it from my perspective. Which is like, again, all of you don't know my financial situation, but I've told people many times on stream and in videos that you can just go to Social Blade and see how much money I make, do the math, and realize that it's not that much money, right? That when I do my videos and I talk to other professional video makers and they hear that I do 2 documentaries in a month with 2 workers, they always don't believe me. That's a true fact. When I've talked to people from NoClip and these other documentary places, they're always like, what? You guys have 2 guys on staff? That's all you do? It's like, yeah, 2 of us. That's what we do. So, I'm at a healthy spot now with the Death of a Game series where every Death of a Game I can almost get about 100K dollars. I'm just kidding. Views. But that views, if you're wondering what does that actually shake out to, sadly, not as much as you might think. So for a video getting 100,000 views, that video makes me about $300 to $400. So can you see how chasing views and chasing the trend becomes this like never-ending, constant push to do more numbers, more views, and why someone like me doesn't really do that, right? So that's why I actually think it's much better. A fourth of a penny. Exactly. I get paid fourth or a third of a penny. So, that's true. Thanks for saying that, because it's not commonly known that I make a fourth of a penny per view. But, yeah, that's what I'm making, which means that when you break down the math, guys always, you know, celebrate when I have a video do really well. I'm not trying to say don't celebrate, but I'm saying understand that that video getting 200,000 or 300,000 isn't enough to actually sustain me. It's not. It doesn't make me enough money. So meaning that if I keep on the same train of content before I started taking sponsors, excuse me, I would have ran out of money. And I think that's an unfortunate truth that a lot of people either haven't experienced, maybe they haven't been broke themselves, and I mean actually poverty. My family was actually poor growing up, Medicare, you know, that sort of stuff. It is interesting, Neo Velamir. and it will give you exactly what my numbers are essentially every month. So you can just calculate for yourself how much I make in a year. So you know that I'm not lying. I've always been upfront about that so people can know that I'm not like here to secretly shill, because I'm not that kind of person. Just personally, I don't want my shilling to be a secret, which is why now to get into the videos that we just did, we worked with a company called Watokol, a Chinese ad agency who worked with two different separate developers on two different ads. On top of that, we worked with another ad agency, um, Tomato Interactive Studio, I believe is their name. Blue Focus is the parent company, and they worked with us on Tower of Fantasy. So I mentioned this on my community post that I was going to have some sponsored videos coming on the channel. And I had thought about these for a long time. I've been getting offers to do sponsored videos for 3 years. And I've said no to every single one, including multiple thousands of dollars, including, I'll go as far to say 5-digit numbers. I turned down 2 5-digit numbers. On top of that, throughout this 3 years, I turned down 2 employment contracts to be hired, right? And that was because I did not want to work anymore. I wanted to stay doing what I was doing. I actually have worked with multiple clients, including developers, who have offered me jobs. Maybe not known as much, but essentially that's what happened. Was that I had the chance to go get on the payroll and get paid the X amount of money, but I said no because I don't feel like that's doing what I want to do. What I want to do is pushing my videos, is pushing my my content. The reason why I turned it down, thanks for asking, is because at the time, I just could not imagine myself doing a sponsored video. I had done some sponsored content, 60-second ads, so on and so forth, but I always was like, you know what, like a sponsored video, I just can't see myself doing that. I feel like my audience would hate it. I feel like I would hate it. I feel like it doesn't make sense. People are gonna just judge me about it. I had very negative views about it. And so what actually changed my mind was over time I realized, staring at my empty bank account, that as people are asking me and begging me to go back to a noir mystery style, and I literally cannot afford it, it's too expensive. I don't think people understand how expensive art is, because it's been undervalued a lot, but like good art costs literally, I'm not even kidding guys, hundreds of euros for a day. Meaning like a top artist will charge you almost 300 to 400 euro in a day just for one day's work. That's one day. So you do the math and you can realize, man, it gets expensive very quickly, right? It does. And since I don't have any funding and I don't take any funding from anywhere else, because I've gotten offers for funding, which mean that they take an X amount of my channel and they give me money. I turn those offers down too, because that means that I'm going to lose my complete control of the channel. That means that you guys aren't going to get the exact stuff that you want or desire anymore too. It means that basically, and it is still cheap, by the way. 300 a day is still cheap, by the way. One person told me 500 euro in a day, and I'll tell you, that person was damn worth it. Was damn worth it. And that's the hard part. That's cheap. That's 300 euro a day. That's 500 euro a day. Not USD either. So like we're talking to add an extra bit on there. Damn talented artists. But it's expensive to do stuff like that and full production animated stuff for the channel, right? When I don't have this money somehow stacked up or whatever. Another big thing happened is I went through the process of trying to move to Spain. And I actually ended up not liking it. And so I spent a lot of money on that, unfortunately. Because that's what life is about. Taking chances and trying things out. And I'm okay with that, right? That was my decision. Me trying to make a better life for myself. So essentially, like, these mini life decisions and kind of open dialogue with my audience, the people that are the closest to me, that I respect their opinions the most, including the ones that don't agree with me all the time, mostly. And then also talking to, you know, myself like everyone else does, right? And thinking about, what do I want to be? What do I see myself doing? And how much does this mean to me? And what I kind of realized is that, like, my favorite content creator of all time, rest in peace, was Total Biscuit. Total Biscuit had sponsored videos. Total Biscuit also had sponsored ads. Now, the fact that Total Biscuit was able to end up doing these kinds of things and not essentially get a crap ton of, crap for it, I think is in testament or a testament to how well he was able to do these integrations. Um, Simultaneously, someone like him was able to say no to so many more people because they were making way more money off of ad revenue, because when they blew up was when the ad revenue was incredibly high. I would say 3 times higher than what it currently is. So again, there's a lot of things that are at play here that make it a little bit harder for me to just follow somebody else's format from 4 years ago. But even if I did, essentially, Total Biscuit has sponsored videos. So it was like this realization of like, wait a minute, I can put out videos that are clearly marked as advertisements, which means that if you know how to read, that's a snarky comment, I guess, like Willow would say, you know that that's an ad, right? And if you can listen to me speaking after seeing any of my other videos, you can also intuitively feel that it is. Now, the one thing that I want to address, and Maghorn's here in chat brought this point up, and other people did too, is that some people's criticism is that if they wanted to see an ad, they wanted to see an ad more in the style of like a deep introspective or like a deep dive, almost a borderline review of a game. That's what they wanted to see. But here's the thing, that's not what I was paid to do. I wasn't paid to review the game. I was paid to review the news and talk about the game launching. And so that is advertising the game, which means that there's some details in the game, but it actually doesn't tell you about the game in some deep way, right? It isn't some deep impressions, like, not all impressions are deep, but I'm saying a deep impressions like Lazy Peon does, and it's not a full review, right? So it's essentially an ad, no more than just an ad. That's it. Which means that any other perspectives about it are basically being formed from either your distaste for the game, your distaste for the kind of game, potentially, or maybe your ignorance in knowing, for example, why somebody like me would take a deal. Somebody asked me, and I'll answer this question very simply. Why wouldn't you just do an ad? Well, you want to know why? Because an ad that's compared to a sponsored video is at bare minimum, 3 times as much money. 3 times as much. So it means that if you know business, why wouldn't you take that deal instead? It's better and it's for less time invested, which means that my audience can, for example, at worst, complain because they don't want to see this video and they think that it's immoral that I support a Chinese game. I think I'm not exactly sure what the specific arguments about immorality, because people talk about gacha, but ignore ESO. ESO has worse monetization than 85% of gacha games, which is just kind of weird that nobody wants to have honest discussions about monetization without taking out the ethnocentrism, right? That is there, that you can't ignore. Sorry. Really, when people want to talk about morality concerning monetization, they're talking about their morality, what they believe, what they know. So, yeah. Yes, he actually did defend loot boxes in Overwatch, but that's kind of irrelevant to me because, again, the point is not that because he did a video on a game that had a loot box that he would then somehow support them being included in every game with no regulation, right? Like, clearly TB didn't support that, but that's called nuance, right? Animation on YouTube is basically dead because of how the algorithm directs from shorter videos, so the cost of production doesn't come back through views, except when you're doing a sponsored video. You guys understand what I'm saying? I'm not going to explain it anymore. I don't enjoy restrictions of my freedom of expression. Fair enough. I think regarding that, one thing I will say that did bother me regarding that is that so many sponsors, not just these sponsors, don't like me using the word death. It's kind of weird considering my entire series is using the word death. So it does kind of feel like that's another reason why I can't work with all the clients, because I don't know if you guys knew this, but when I first came up with my channel series, I was actually getting demonetized. True fact. I was getting demonetized consistently on all of my videos because it had death in it. My channel series being named that way, which I did because I wanted to name it that way. I didn't give a fuck about the virility or like the viability or whatever the hell of the name and the term, just because I wanted it. I've gotten so much shit about that too, which seems silly, I know, but it's just like, really. Especially Jim, when, for example, in that video, and they literally okayed this, I don't know if people actually heard this, I said not only do I not like gacha, I didn't even play it. I don't even play it. I don't even get involved with it. So it's like, I said that in the video, and because people don't watch the video, they can just say in response, Nerd Slayer supports gacha. It's like, I don't think it's morally wrong, but is that the same as supporting it? I don't think it is. Yep, video games can literally have people getting their heads cut off. True fact. But whenever I had my series title come out, and it was like my third video when it started happening. It wasn't immediately. It happened on City of Heroes, I think was the first one. I was getting demonetized. Like, constantly. I wasn't even monetized on Warhammer, because EA claimed that video. Another fact people don't know. So there's so much behind the scenes that I don't always say, because I don't like to talk about the minutia too much. And also, at the end of the day, guys, like, I chose this career, so whether or not it's difficult and I'm struggling and I got like gotta tell you how the process works and da 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 da, that just is how it is. So it means that I have to kind of come to grips with it, right? And in terms of people wondering about the sponsored videos that I recently uploaded, you can see that I'm sweating my ass off because I'm in fucking Texas and it's hot as hell in my fucking room. Also, this is a moisture shirt, so it helps a little bit, but I'm good. I'm alive. I've got water. Yeah, Bink. True story. EA claimed Warhammer, so I only made a few hundred off of it, even though it's one of my biggest videos ever. That video should have made me thousands of dollars, and EA took that money from me. And it was because I was early in my career, and I didn't know that I could challenge them over the grounds of fair use, so I just got scared, and I just left my video up, because it meant more to me than the money. Death of a Warhammer video. Woke culture destroyed some good games, so let me start up my rainbow capitalism scandal. Um, but for the first game that I covered, which was Phantom Blade Executioners, if you're not into games like Golden Axe, then yeah, you're not gonna like that kind of game. If you don't like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle side-scroller action-style combat games, if you don't like Maple Story, you're not gonna like that game. It's really that blunt. Now, if you're wondering why I couldn't just make these literal comparisons, it's because you can't make literal comparisons when you're using a competitor's product. Not really. Not most of the time, right? Like, I can't sit in here when I'm doing an ad for Apple Music and then start talking about Spotify music. They don't want me to do that, right? So in this case, people ask, like, how come you don't talk about Genshin Impact? It's like, guys, because they don't want me to mention Impact. You guys don't think I don't see the similarities, like. Yeah, I don't think I don't look at it and be like, okay, these have like similar mechanics. This boat is literally the same in both games. Like, there's like a boat flying mechanic. It's the same in both games. Like, that's not me saying anything controversial. It's literally just true. But I can't say that because the client doesn't want me to compare their product with somebody else's, which is what any client would ask you to not do, essentially, right? So you didn't hear me saying stuff like, it's like Genshin Impact, or when I was talking about Tower of Fantasy. Now that ad, I'll be honest, people's negativity concerning that ad is fairly manufactured. While I can sit there and say that you guys are critical of Phantom Blade Executioners, because it's not a typical game that my audience would play, because we haven't even covered Dungeon Fighter Online yet, which is what that game also is kind of copying off of. So most people here aren't familiar with Chinese-style online games. Fair enough. But then Tower of Fantasy, it's like you guys got experience with Genshin Impact, so you have more of an exposure to this sort of thing. And on top of that, it's a cross-platform action online RPG type game. I guess, to be very blunt, what's not that impressive about it? I genuinely think it's a very good-looking game. Can people make arguments for why it isn't, I guess? But, you know, I need to hear them because that was my real thoughts. I think the game looks fantastic. I think the cross-platform polish and ability to level and progress is awesome. I think more Western MMOs should attempt to do stuff like that. Absolutely. It just so happens that in order for stuff like that to become a realization, guess what? We have to take a little bit of that gotcha. And I don't see that as that morally wrong or bad. Because if it means we're getting this much more innovation because of things like that, because of a free-to-play game being able to monetize far more than being a paid game, again, guys, you can see why so many people, millions of people, don't have an issue with this kind of game. Maghorn, the amount of money that Raid Shadow Legends has asked me and has thrown at me, I honestly right now would start crying, man. Like, it's like I could use that money in so many ways to afford my move, to put into my savings so I can have some savings to prepay my healthcare for the whole year, like prepay my gym membership. Like, man, like Raid has been throwing money at me. And if you're wondering what my stance is going forward after I put out my last sponsored video, because I have another one in the works that should be launching pretty soon, let me just say that these 3 videos, without saying how much exact money they made, because I don't know if the clients will get mad at me, let's just say this. They made me almost as much as I make in an entire year. Think about that. For people that are angry, still after all of my explanation, fair enough. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching the 6 Pixels Under podcast and seeing me and hearing my thoughts. But those 3 videos, the one that hasn't come out yet, have made more than my entire money in an entire year. So for people wondering, because I saw some people wondering, I hope this was worth it. I hope you get a good amount of cash from this. I hope selling out was worth it. Blah blah blah. It was. That's why I did it. Like, that's what we're here for. That's why I was completely open about it, because I wanted you guys to not be confused. So going forward, if other companies like that want to do video ads, I'm going to do as I've done. Clearly say beforehand it's an ad, launch it as an ad, say in the video it's an ad, and then tell everybody who asks me about it it's an ad. And that's my stance. So if you're wondering what I think about those videos I just put out, they're ads, guys. If you don't like my ads, can you at least like give me the critical advice or perspective for why? Would you like ads for me to be more in my typical deep style of content? If you would, then I will start changing how I approach future clients and make sure that when I approach them, not only do I approach them with the right dollar amount to do that, but the right schedule, so I can actually put that out. Because in many cases, as someone also already intuited, I'm rushed to launch these things because this expansion just came out, which means that I have to put this video out and I didn't have a choice. So can I sit there and play 20 hours of the game? No. I spent maybe 3 or 4, and that's again all shown in the video. My gameplay footage is shown, my level is shown in the video. None of that is like hidden or like, I'm not trying to mislead anybody. I actually think Tower of Fantasy looks a lot like Phantasy Star. To be honest, I think that that's a great example. Genshin meets Phantasy Star. And now I'll go a step further. Playing Tower of Fantasy was the most fun that I've had walking around in a world with almost no player in my exact instance that I've had in the past 2 years. Some of the most fun. And what I'm trying to say is that there is potential there. Does that mean that that game's for me? No, but it means that this style of game, especially with the mobile cross-platform aspects, which I'm trying to, by the way, do with my game, I'm playing it and I'm like, can I make my game like this? Like, this would be awesome, right? Now, would I do it gacha style? No. But would I have potential random elements if I thought that it would make the difference between making my game free and paid? Would. I thought that that was worth it, because I want my game to be free, so it's playable by everybody. So that's another concern, is how often or how many players and how accessible do you want your game to be? It was a bit or late for a stream. Good point. They're owned by a casino, so they've got money. Yeah. Hell yeah, King Raya. Ads are fine, but just make sure it's not from scummy companies, and that's what I've been trying to do as much as possible. I will fully admit, and feel free to shit on me, guys, that when I did HelloFresh, I did not look into the whole union busting shit. When I found out about it, do I support that? No. Like, that goes without saying for me. I mean, I literally quit the corporate world. Do I agree with it? No. Like, surprise. But, no. I'm always gonna rail on anti-corporate stuff. Like, if you guys expect anything different at this point, I don't know why you're here. But that is kind of what I like to talk about. But to Sleepy Time's point, if you guys ever feel like when I announce a sponsor beforehand or when I work with a sponsor that you don't like this sponsor because of moral reasons, not just because of, you know, I don't like their game, tell me. Let me know. I actually really listen to that stuff, and I won't be working with HelloFresh going forward. No offense to HelloFresh. I am glad that they were able to help me tremendously. The amount of money that they gave me was comparable to the amount of money that these companies have given me to do these sponsored videos. Not completely comparable, but comparable enough. So I needed that sponsorship as well, to be able to afford how much it costs to move, essentially, right? I'm glad, Wolf. I know not a lot of content creators are as transparent about this stuff, and I am just sometimes I shouldn't be, like some people would argue. But it's more that I just like for people to understand where I'm coming from. And at the end of the day, is everyone going to understand it? Is everyone going to agree with me? No, but then I end up just feeling much better because I feel like I kind of got my shit off, you know? Like, people want to feel whatever they want to feel, then that's your prerogative. Hello, Judas. How's it going? Shalom. Your work is amazing. I love your videos. Appreciate it. I think transparency is key. People will always be outraged by something. But if you're honest with it being an ad, I think people will be fine. Fine. Hail everyone. How's it going, Chris? I'm okay with the ads as long as it's easy to scrub past. Like channels that have an ad bar. So actually, I've been experimenting with doing timestamps more often. I don't know why they haven't been working lately. I don't know if I have to enable them. But I've been putting timestamps in my recent videos and they haven't really been showing up. But in that respect, I was going to do that for the ad. Because in my opinion, if my audience doesn't want to watch my ad, they don't have to. But I encourage them to support me. Yes, there's plenty of MMOs that have suffered from the complexity issue that Han has suffered from. In fact, one of the biggest issues is actually Guild Wars. Guild Wars has this massive issue with PvP being essentially way too hard from a mechanical perspective, but also incredibly hard from a strategical perspective. Problem with morals is a person can make anything morally objectionable if they want, especially with the media content, because think of the children. Ah, interesting. That's a good point. People do say think of the children a lot. And you know, for me it's like if we want to just say carte blanche, ban all loot boxes and gacha, I would be okay with it. But since that's not the discussion we're having, we're just picking and choosing which ones we like. That's less interesting to me, like intellectually. And I'll be a step further and say I think it's a little bit disingenuous and intellectually dishonest at the very least, how people kind of structure those conversations. Because like I said, like we can talk about some of these games and how they structure it, but come on, have you guys seen like how ESO handles this, or Lord of the Rings, or SWTOR? They have gacha in them. They're just called loot boxes. So it's like this Western versus Eastern perspective. I feel like that also is at play here, where people, sorry, whether it's because of ignorance and not having enough exposure, but they're being a bit xenophobic about an Asian culture. Because I think if Tower of Fantasy was a Western game, I'll just come out and say it, I don't think people would give it as much. And I think that that's a little bit unfair, and a large reason why the MMO industry and online RPG industry in the Western market, especially for mobile devices, is kind of shit. It's not very good. It's because the Eastern markets are better at the moment, and they have been. So you might not like the gacha elements that come with them, but you have to at least accept that fact. Basically, it's very commonly assumed that cultures all act the same way. They don't. Which means that just because you were born in, say for example, America, Nevada, or some shit, doesn't mean that the entire world and the entirety of the culture feels the same way as you. For example, randomized fun has been not only around for hundreds of years, it's actually one of the most common forms of enjoyment. Which means, like, Gabe, for example, who's like the only one in chat who basically says, like, all of it is bad and it's always immoral, I just find it a bit strange because unless, Gabe, you're not playing any of these games, and that's, by the way, the vast majority of them that have this kind of business practice, including the ones that are the most popular games that you guys can list right now, that aren't Eastern. It's just, it feels like a lot of pick and choosing from people, personally. Where it's like, well, this gotcha and this loot box is not that bad, but that one over there, you're bad and you're immoral for playing that one. It's like, okay, fair enough. If TOF was a Western game, I would still hate on it. That's fair. What are your reasons for hating on it, out of curiosity? $99 if companies have enough money to buy ads from influencers, you can bet that, yeah, unless they're literally the de facto guy in the industry, right? Grand Blue Fantasy, I think, does gacha really well. They give enough free stuff to make it playable, and you can spend if you want more. That's the same kind of style that Arc of Nepishtim, Wise Online Arc of Nepishtim uses, which is essentially almost like a battle pass. So gacha has evolved a lot. It's not just the same way that it used to be. It's an extremely myopic view. Great point. Western gamers started with the paid content and free-to-play mindsets that were reserved to mobile garbage. Eastern games came from the other side. Exactly. And it's just strange because, like, Westerners will simultaneously decry when a game isn't free, but then hate when it has free-to-play monetization. And it's like, at the current moment, you can't divorce those things. They're one and the same. The ironic part is that the Western market is just to blame as much for microtransactions as the Eastern market is. It's just that they're not the one that gets basically accredited or attributed to all of it. Perfect example. When Nexon invented microtransactions effectively, they did it on accident and to just revitalize and revive a dying game. So essentially, it was given a great utility and gave great utility. But then they started realizing, wait a minute, we can just do that everywhere. So Nexon brought multiple games, their Western branch, just like NCSoft brought a Western branch, and they all tried to do that same thing in the West. And it didn't work. And here's the funny thing. It was just collectively said it didn't work because gacha and these kinds of things don't work in America. That was a lie. They didn't work because these games weren't good enough. And the cultural aspects just didn't appeal enough to the Western audience. Why do we know that that's the case? Because then ArcAge came out and shut everybody up. Which is that everybody who was complaining about, I'm never going to play Eastern games. I'm never going to play pay-to-win games. I'm never going to play gacha games. I'm never going to play pay labor games. I'm never going to play XP boost type games. Have all played ArcAge since then. It's one of the most played games in the world ever. And it's also one of the most successful monetary games. The game was built for monetization. So ArcAge, one of literally the most innovative games ever, is also one of the most gacha-infested, microtransaction-infested games ever. You can't divorce those two things. Sadly, it's kind of like when a bad person does good, and you don't want to celebrate the good, but you kind of have to, even if they are a bad person, right? Like, even if you don't like that game or that style of content, it still does well. It's still effective. It still has brought immense change and positivity. That being said, at that time, while there were a Western audience in Lineage, Western audience in MapleStory, they weren't nearly as big as the East-Western audiences and the Eastern audiences, which dwarf other games. Still to this day, many of these games, like MapleStory Mobile and Lineage Mobile, dwarf AAA, fully launched, games. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. First off, Gachapon comes from Japan, and it's been around for decades. So it's not because of video games, it's existed before that. It just was adapted to be put in video games, which it naturally fits into. And kept some games alive because they were able to introduce it. So if games aren't free to play, it means that the design has to change, right? To then make a game that you pay for monthly. And while I want that to exist, I want there to be games that do charge money and are worth it. I also want there to be games that are free to play and are accessible. So it's like this spectrum, and it's not as simple as just this or that. I give shit to all games that have paid loot boxes. They're terrible gambling mechanics that hurt players like me who care about cosmetic stuff. Great point, Ayuru. That's exactly why I hate Black Desert Online and ArcAge in some ways. I hate how much of the like cosmetics and how you look in those games are literally revolved around how much you spend. Same thing in Terra. I don't like that approach personally either for that reason. That being said, why do they monetize costumes? Because then it's better to monetize that than get everybody angry over monetizing power. Unless you're trying to make that much more money from monetizing power. See the dilemma? It's not always bad, but it's so hard to resist going in that direction when you make way more money. I'll give you a perfect example of this. Tryon Worlds was a Western company. They put out a bunch of games, defunct now, got acquired. Rift was one of those games. Rift was one of the most successful MMOs at the time, and kind of historically. And so, at one point it had a big downturn. They brought it back when they went free to play, and everyone was loving it. And then they realized, after working with, by the way, ArcAge, they learned that they could make as much money as possible. Or sorry, I think it was ArcAge or Terra. I get them confused sometimes. That they could make a lot more money from borrowing tactics from Eastern developers. So they did. And guess what they then proceeded to do? Create pay-to-win games and microtransaction-filled games worse in the Eastern market. That's why Tryon Worlds has such a negative stigma. Is it, in many ways, was worse. You could literally buy raid gear. Like, that's in-game gear that you could buy. You're literally buying power. And the developers would say, well, it's just last year's raid gear, so it's different. And Westerners, again, have accepted this kind of stuff for some time now. Same thing with, like, forced DLC memes, right? The problem is that as a market, the West did not defend value very well whenever these other practices started to come in. And so the ironic thing is that the biggest problem because of these practices coming in don't even come from their market or those games. If anything, they come from those markets and those games and influencing and teaching everyone within our markets. Like, who do you think taught EA how to do microtransactions? You think that EA was after all the Asian developers? No, they were quite early. They were doing microtransactions for a long time. So what I'm trying to say is that the Eastern developers were a little bit ahead of the curve, but the Western developers and publishers have been reaping the benefits and then some. And there's far less cultural reason to do that. Does that make sense? Meaning that in Asia, for example, in Korea, it makes sense to have pay to win in some cases because the black market is illegal, which means that you can only buy and sell goods through the actual store. Which means that they've actually found a way to basically get rid of illegal black market stuff. Does it completely get rid of it? No. But it basically does because it's actually illegal, not just against the rules. So that's why a lot of people in Korea spend money on things, because you can't get it other ways. And because culturally it's acceptable. Especially in Chinese culture, where essentially there's a concept known as having the wealth that comes from your family and the people for you. And it's almost understood in this like Hinduistic perspective of like social hierarchy, that that's where you're just supposed to be. So again, these are cultural reasons for why they function differently. That America doesn't have, yet still has some of the worst microtransactions and games filled with it that I've seen, and practices, yet doesn't have nearly as much of the xenophobia or the negativity surrounding the cultural aspects, which I just kind of think is weird. ArcAge was popular at the start and in beta. People didn't realize what it was after release. It was already known in Korea. It came out in Korea first. Again, please, let's normalize the fact that many of these Eastern games are going to launch there and then some, meaning that they've been out there. It was out there for like a year or two before. Which means that everything that was predicted in terms of pay to win, you could have figured it out immediately. if you just looked at the Korean game. But why do people think that it's not going to be the same? Because, oh, localization, because they're going to change it, because it's not the same market. Guys, part of why they've been failing so much is because they keep treating it the same. So many of these games have failed because they treat it the same. ArcGage was just the game that was good enough to keep doing that and still reap the benefits of it. So I think it's incorrect to say that, because no, people knew that it was, right? A pay-to-win game. It's literally designed with a labor system, which is the definition of pay-to-win. But because it's a Jake Song game that's very innovative and fun, they're willing to kind of just like about those aspects. These guys were charging like $200 to get into the alpha. How was it not pay to win? Yeah, Card, I actually a TikToker told me about that kind of stuff and horrified me, unfortunately, regarding how much money they got for like doing simple posts on TikTok. But you can buy Power and Tower of Fantasy, yet you defend it and accept the money from the company. How is accepting money from the company defend buying Power? Like, that's not the same thing. No offense, Gabe, but you seem like either like your arguments aren't fully realized yet, and this is like your first time talking to other people about them, or to be blunt, very emotional. Or like, are you really walking down the street and having these kind of reactions when you see advertisements on billboards and shit? Like, oh my god, did you know a kid could buy this and he could? Come on, man. Like, who are you performing for? No offense. That's what I'm saying, Suga, is we as gamers collectively, globally, took way too much nickel and diming. But I feel like the West, we took it when we shouldn't have even been taking it in some cases, because it didn't even match our cultural perspectives. Not that they can't shift, but it's just like, we should have done a much better job at just saying no, 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 no. But now that we've allowed it, now it's a matter of how much exists, right? It's not even a matter of will it exist, because that's how the market has shifted towards. Hey, how's it going, Eva? Microtransactions are not necessarily bad, but the way that they are designed now tends to be exploitative. That's the problem. Yeah, unfortunately, they're almost always exploitative in some sort of way, right? They're meant to get you to buy them. That means that they're trying to incentivize you as much as possible. I will add the caveat and agree that they've gotten more egregious with it, but that's kind of the point that I'm making, is that's because as a market, we've accepted it. And that's a bit problematic in my opinion. Microtransactions are never going away. Old days are behind us. Bust out your wallets, homies. I mean, if you don't want to pay for a game up front, how else are you going to pay for that game? Because you have to pay for it. It's not free. Free to play is the biggest oxymoron ever. And it was also genius marketing, because it's not free to play. You're paying in time, right? For a lot of these tasks. So whenever you get to a point where you don't want to put that amount of time in, you buy it. The problem is that all it takes is them to just barely tweak those knobs, and suddenly you're buying it, buying it, buying it. Because like in League of Legends, it's a pain in the ass to level your character up to level 30. I'm saying. Yes, I'm emotional because I watch as the gaming industry I love is being destroyed by these companies, and watching more and more YouTubers supporting them by these companies is saddening to me. You're watching as the gaming industry I love is being destroyed by these companies. By what companies? By Asian companies? Like, are you? Is this again like part of like the xenophobia meme? Because again, EA is doing it, Blizzard is doing it, Activision is doing it. Every major corporation in America that's hiding in Ireland is doing it. And by the way, many of this was accepted. People complained about microtransactions for Shadow of Mordor, but where was everybody for the second game? Like, they basically stopped complaining about it. And so, like, the thing is that you can have your feelings that you wish that monetization wouldn't be so. I guess the point is, and that's what I'm saying, it's hard to get through your emotion because I don't really know exactly what you're trying to pinpoint, which is that, like, is it the fact that things incentivize people to spend money? Then no offense, buddy, but you should take a class on psychology and advertising. I took one at the University of Texas, And let me tell you, everything is trying to manipulate. Everything is trying to trick you. Everything is trying to get you to buy something. That's the whole point of it. That's how they make money. So if your point is that you don't like when it's done obviously, then again, you're still making a very specific argument because there's so many games that are doing it as well. So it's just one of those things where if you want a game to be free, it will always have microtransactions. So if the argument is that you don't want microtransactions, period, then that's what I'm trying to understand, Gabe, is like where are you actually coming from? Because then those games wouldn't exist if they're not free. And then the argument becomes, okay, well, if only paid games exist and only subscription-based games exist, then we're basically back to the same World of Warcraft model where we're waiting, and Final Fantasy XIV, where we're waiting on the next content to come out because they run out of it so quickly. Because that's how it's designed. So meaning that like you're paying money to wait for content to come to you. So while you might have a ceiling that's much shorter than a free-to-play player, right? That's how free-to-play games make more money. You actually have, technically speaking, a literal entitlement to that content because you're paying for it ahead of time. So meaning that like subscription-based games work when they work, but fail epically when they don't, right? So it's a cool model and it's very idealistic, but unfortunately, it's not been the most successful model, literally, and it also just unfortunately lends itself to being basically taken advantage of by people who are always going to be more incentivized to make more money. Yeah, and I mean, it's not that's I'm being serious. Seriously, like if you can't take a class on it, I'm not sure what your age is. Read into the psychology of advertisement. It's basically all around trying to enrage you, turn you on, make you happy, make you laugh, but it's trying to make you do something. It's trying to manipulate you. And so the reason why I'm having this very like nuanced argument with you is because that I actually think that in many cases the Western form of monetization already as is without gotcha being introduced was already bad. And I was already against it in many ways. The ironic part is that for me, when I talk about this sort of stuff, nobody's interested in hearing about it. For example, when I talk about how Elder Scrolls Online has worse monetization than the majority of even Eastern games, there's no discussion about it, so we can't actually sit there and say, well, why is that the case? I can tell you why. It's because how they're monetizing the West audience is not the same as how they're monetizing the East audience. It's similar, but now we're figuring out that it's actually kind of different. And for example, the Eastern audience is a lot more costume dependent than the Western audience has been historically. That doesn't mean that's a fact and that will always be the case, but that means that they're going to, for example, in a game that's more geared towards that audience, be focusing a lot more on cosmetic, right? Um, it's just a super giant, complicated conversation. That's while I will accept someone saying they're always going to be against gacha and microtransactions, I think you're better off just saying you're against free-to-play games at that point, because those games will always have them. So if, for example, Gabe is against free-to-play games, and I know like people can meme that and be like, "Oh, how could you be against free-to-play games?" You guys know what I mean. Then that's fair. That's your opinion. At the end of the day, we as people have become much more emotional and have less self-control. It seems like we get manipulated by companies, YouTubers, and all the time. Definitely. Yes, Captain Quack. Captain Quack, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, is that the original WoW model was also trying to make money off of you. It was just trying to slow down the time that it took for you to do things in order to do that. So it could maximize how many months it would take you to do that. The model has changed because it's a lot more, give me this now, give me this now. But, it's much different. I'm actually going to head out here. I've hit a brick wall in terms of my energy levels very suddenly. Yeah, you know what, Cat of the Castle, there are a lot of conversations to have about this and just general economics. So first off, thanks to Gabe for providing a different perspective and keeping the conversations going. As interesting as they ended up being. And thank you to everybody for watching me and also asking questions. What do you think about the way companies need to keep up with profits without raising box prices? Um, a problem of a corporation. Really, I hate to be that guy, and that's kind of what Kat was suggesting, but if you want to talk about this stuff, you have to have a serious discussion about capitalism and corporatism, right? Capitalism's great when it works. Corporatism, pretty much anyone who's not a part of said corporate is not going to like it or enjoy it, right? Unless you're somehow profiting off of it. But that's a whole other discussion. And really, that stuff really does deserve its own video. So sorry I can't do it justice in this quick discussion now, especially with how brain dead I am. But hopefully I thoroughly explained everything and gave you all my perspective. Just so we're clear, I don't care if you like the games that I cover, especially the sponsored ones. Ultimately, you can tell me that you don't like them. You can also tell me that you wish I would cover something else or cover it more in depth. That's your opinion, and you're always entitled to that. All I'm asking for is just the understanding that I'm trying to do the best job that I can with the opportunities that I can and have. So when you see me take them, just know that that's always going to be where I'm coming from. And if you feel like that isn't the case, and you want to judge my moral, that even personally, come have a chat with me. Come to my Discord. Talk to me personally. If you're really that worried about it, like Gabe, again, I'm not trying to be dismissive. Gabe had some issues to talk about, actually came here to talk about it. Willow had some issues, actually came here to talk. I respect that a lot, okay? Thank you for everyone for talking today and being here. It was good conversation and good discussions. Have a good rest of your week. Play games, enjoy life, talk to people, and try not to be too depressed. That's kind of where I'm at right now, but I'm working on it. So, all right, everybody, take care.